would like to welcome our viewers to our program on media and women. Today's topic of discussion is Portrayal of Women on Indian Television. Serials or soaps, as they are known, have their beginning in the afternoon programs telecast in the United States sponsored by soap companies, and that's where they derive their name, soaps. Soaps or serials, as we tend to call them. Serials were not a program which was much respected or regarded. It was looked down upon as a melodramatic, cheaply produced program. It was only in the 80s that there was a certain change in attitude, primarily for two reasons. One reason was that television programming became an important area of study. Secondly, feminists pointed out that a program which was watched by so many women could not be ignored and had a certain amount of importance. To discuss this topic, we have today with us in the studio Dr. Anita Digge, Director Extension Education, Indira Gandhi National Open University, and Sabina Kidwai from AJK Mass Communication Research Center, Jamia Millia Islamia. Anita, I would like to start with you first. A very important question which comes to mind is, how did these genres start and how did they take off, especially in the 80s, which was the starting point of serials and soaps in a way, and how did they represent women?
You know, Abhilasha, one thing we must not forget, which is that in the mid-80s when we did our study, we found that the total television time was between 6 in the evening to 11 at night, and there was just one television channel, so there was no competition, and people had very little opportunity. I mean, there was, as I said, there was no diversity, but what we found was that already the trend was that the soaps were becoming popular, and they did command prime time, and you know, people started watching them. But in terms of the portrayal of women, it was very clear that the trend was that the insider role of the woman was emphasized. Her depiction of a housewife, where she looked after her family, her children, that was what was emphasized. And clearly for the male characters, it was the outsider role. I mean, you know, so there was this kind of a very clear-cut demarcation that was made. Also in terms of the qualities of the woman, I mean, she had to be self-sacrificing, loving, caring, you know, all the very female stereotypes that we have of female characters. Those were the ideals, the ideal female. So she was like the role model. And if there was a deviant, because there were some female characters that were there, but then there were the deviant, and there was always that kind of a black and white characterization of female roles, and the ideal, the role model, of course, was this kind of a woman.
Sabina, how would you look at the serials of the 90s? Would you see it as a continuity, or would you see it as a change? What kind of image emerges in the 90s, and then we go on to the current position as far as serials are concerned?
See, actually, Abhilasha, what has happened is that during the early 90s, you see, this phase of which we saw Bunyad and others changed to some extent. We had serials like Udaan and all, where you did find that the woman has moved out from the house. Udaan is about the story of a young girl who moves out and becomes a police officer and finally fights the system. Now, somewhere there were some serials like that which started to emerge. But at the same time, we also had satellite television coming in. So Doordarshan started losing its hold, and viewing time also increased. So you found there was a competition which was developing, and there are lots of serials which came up during the 90s where we did have women characters which were raising issues of, you know, they were working. But towards the late 90s, we find that there is a sudden change back to the 80s period. We find that the women are gradually going back into the household, and this time the change is slightly different. The woman is not, she is, you know, portrayed as a character who has a personality, who's very well dressed, who could also be working. Like Saas is a very clear example. It's a woman who rebels because her husband has an extramarital affair. But after that, ultimately she goes back to him. You see, she is not, and you can see that the way the whole, they realize that the advertising and everything has changed. A serial which talks about a divorce, and ultimately she goes back to the same man because the system does not accept her otherwise. So, that Saas is an example, and from then on we have Ekta Kapoor, whose each and every serial has a complete ritualization of the family. The families are always very large, the women stay inside the house, they are well dressed, they are well-to-do families. It is also a hegemony of the middle class. Now we don't see the working class on television. And this is especially for, your satellite channels, which is the Star, which are the most popular. So this kind of a woman who outwardly is very smart, she is English speaking, she does everything, but she doesn't move out of the house. She follows very traditional, ritualistic lifestyles. Every episode of, she has about 10 serials which are on television. They are all connected with some kind of mythological story. There is always a link there. And the traditional images of Sita and all are being, they're constantly being revived. And that is considered to be the ideal Bahu. The other thing is, which is what Anita also said, that even deviance again here. You see, in the middle we had a phase where we found that women did have extramarital affairs. They suffered, but they didn't suffer also. It was not completely acceptable, but there were characters like that. Now we find that if a woman is deviant, she definitely will suffer for it. And I think one of the most popular serials is the one which comes at 10 o'clock, Kahani Ghar Ghar Ki, where you find that Pallavi is a deviant character, but she is paid a massive price for the deviance. And the ideal character is Parvati, who finally brings the household back together, Or we are watching a serial which is called Kyunki Saas Bhi Kabhi Bahu Thi. In that character also, Tulsi is the ideal Bahu. One, she produces children, when and how required. She is a very important part. The fact that the other Bahu cannot produce a child is a very negative factor. But they are very popular, and it is very important to also see their popularity.
I find this very, very interesting. But I think, Anita and Sabina, you can both think about this, is that I can turn around and say that it is popular because people like to watch these serials. Women watch these serials. Can we as academics or as women condemn a genre or the way a genre portrays women despite the fact that women derive certain amount of pleasure from it?
Yeah, well, the thing is that, but I want to go back to what Sabina was saying, because I don't think in the 80s also the working class was represented, because that was another thing that we've noticed, that there was an invisibilization of the working class. And if at all a working class person, a woman, was depicted, then she was invariably as a servant. And also in terms of principal roles, you never had a working class woman who was your principal character. And to come back to your question, who is making those choices? Because what is happening is that it's a very small section that is deciding what should be television fare. It is their taste that is being, catered to. The struggles of even the middle class women, where are they reflected in television? Or the struggles of the working class are completely invisibilized and completely marginalized. So it is, in a sense, it's a very sanitized kind of a picture that you get of even a middle class family, that if there is any strife, if there is any conflict, then it does get resolved. That is the kind of very sanitized picture that you get. So you begin to question whose reality is reflected.
Another question which came to my mind as you was talking about the soaps from the 80s and the soaps in the 90s, leaving a small early 90s period which you said was tended to give women more choices, but the late 90s and the 80s denied women choices. Now, I would say, I would like to know from you whether there was a change in the way they denied the rights.
Actually, what has happened in the, especially we would take 2000 or 2001 also, we find that what Ekta Kapoor has done with her serials is that, like I told you, she has revived mythology in a big way. Then she has ritualized her serials extensively. And this is also a part of this consciousness which has grown, that you have invasion from the sky, your traditional values are being, you're losing them because you're getting too modernized. So therefore you must revive the family, you must revive tradition. And the way to revive tradition is to go back to rituals, which you can visually show. If you look at all her 10 or 15 serials which are coming on TV, they all have that ritual of that girl, there is a matka of whatever.
Which knocks off.
Each one of them deals with the institution of marriage. She talks about oppression in that marriage, but somewhere always finds the solutions or the escape from that problem. Divorce does not figure. There is always a compromise which happens. Divorce does not figure. She makes her characters follow every possible ritual, and the person who's bad in them, which is very important, is the person who's modern. If a girl wears jeans, if a girl is generally very modern looking, there is no space. There is no space for her. She may be the most entertaining character, but she is also considered by the family and everybody as the person who's breaking the norms of the house. So Ekta Kapoor has revived tradition in a very, and she's revived it in a palette which is very easy for us to take, because we find that lots of ceremonies like Karwa Chauth and all have got revived in a very big way. And we find that they are being celebrated in a modern packaging, which means that you will celebrate it in a hotel, or you will go and celebrate it somewhere else. So and also, everybody, and even marriages have become very elaborate. You'll have Mehndi, you'll have all these ceremonies, which are packaged very well now. So the same thing she has done, she has packaged it, and the girls, it's not that the younger girls will not identify with the serials. They will identify, because they are finding young modern girls following the rituals, and it's and it's like fun. How do I explain? It's like fun.
They've reduced constraints to the level of fun.
Yeah.
Anita, do you think that there is a particular way in which women are today relating to these serials, which is in some sense problematic? Can we say that by the portrayal of women in these serials, you are creating a context where even in a globalized economy or globalized setup, there could be a crisis of identity between a girl who is now coming out, going to school, going to college, going to work, and at the same time is constantly being located in this traditional structure?
Yeah, because on the one hand, you do have these forces of globalization. There is because of the various commercial interests, you do have the pressure on the woman who has to look more glamorous. And then of course the cosmetic industry is vying with to ensure that the woman would look more and more glamorous. And so there is that kind of pressure. And on the other hand, of course, given the reality that women are stepping out of the homes, you do have larger number of girls now, finishing college or taking up jobs, and women who are getting married but who still have a career of their own. So that situation has changed from, say, the 80s, and is changing very rapidly. But nevertheless, there is an attempt to sort of again to delimit. To sort of again carve out a little niche for her, that all said and done, but that is where she belongs. It is the home. And that is something which is very sacred. She has a responsibility towards her husband, towards her children, and that's something that should not be upset. That is kind of dimmed into women all the time through these kinds of serials that we watch, you see. And that is very pernicious, because nowhere is there an attempt to redefine gender roles and stereotypes. There isn't that kind of debate or discussion. But basically it is to see to it that, you know, you circumscribe that is the space which is legitimately yours.
Sabina, another thing which has concerned me, and since you've been looking at Muslim serials also, is the fact that there is a distinct attempt to put women in slots according to their cultural or religious identities. And I was wondering how it is done, whether it's done, and what kind of consequences would this kind of slotting of women according to very well-defined religious and cultural identity, what would it be?
You see, what has happened is that because most serials are going back to traditions, even among the Muslim serials that you're seeing on TV, you find that they're going back to traditions. Again, you will not, in these serials, again, you will deal with the rich upper class family. And as Muslim women have always carried the banner of talaq with them wherever they went, you know, it's been there in Hindi films, it's been there always. The same thing is back. We have definitely the issues of polygamy and talaq there in the serial. It may be an absolutely modern household, but they will follow the most archaic ways of archaic customary laws, you know,
of day-to-day living.
Of day-to-day living. So it's a very, you know, you see a household, you see a character who's dressed modern, who's living in a modern society, but she is seeming to follow everything which is negative. You see, she's adopting those customs. Now, you know, it's not necessary, so we have moved away from the burqa-clad woman, but not necessarily she is more, I mean, she's more progressive, nor is the space more progressive. So it's just that she looks, and she's also, the worst thing is that she, especially in the Muslim serials, is that the girl does not have any ability to fight. She is not even capable of being deviant, because she remains still very voiceless. And that is, it's a very visual image kind of a change, but the actual image has not changed.
But what I was concerned about is this whole thing that women no longer seem to have a common cause. Each one is doing her ritual, and that way, you know, women are not really being able to identify with each other, which was a very common characteristic of the early 80s when the women movement was so strong. And given the kind of communalization of politics, do you think that it has a divide of the us and the they in some sense?
In some sense, yeah. The serials have become very defined. You are identifying a Hindu family very clearly, and always, and you're identifying a Muslim family very clearly. The other thing which you were talking about, women's issues, one thing is very important. You have to realize that Ekta Kapoor in a serial brings in characters, like there's a character who got raped. There's a character who, she brings in these characters, and they happen in middle class. And for a minute you do think that, okay, she is finally raising issues which should not be raised. But somehow everything remains with the individual. She never allows any issue like this to spread to a larger circle of women. Everything should remain within the family. The family will deal with it. You don't appeal outside. So this is what, actually what you're saying is what they're doing at two levels. One is not only the religious level, but also at the level of women appealing to other women is also limited to within the household.
Okay, now one question to both of you. What are the kind of images that you would like to see?
I would like to see some of the struggles in which women are engaged in. You know, I would like to see women characters who have defied certain social norms and who've made it in life and, you know, have succeeded. I mean, those are the kinds of serials I'd like to see, even as soaps, because then women in a similar predicament could identify with those characters. You see, because right now they have no such role models at all. And I'd like to see more of the kinds of struggles that women are engaged in. You know, some reflection of that, because while the women's movement also, in a sense, you know, is probably not as strong as it used to be in the 80s and the 90s, but nevertheless, it is still very vibrant, and it is now, I mean, gender or women's issues can no longer be ignored. Even, I mean, I remember earlier, men would laugh, I mean, when you talk about gender, but they can't, they have to take you seriously. I think we would like to sort of see more of what is happening, what are women doing in very many different areas, you know, rather than confining women only to families, to homes, and now largely it seems like joint families. I mean, that's the other thing, is this glamorization of joint families. But what is the kind of struggle that they go through even in a nuclear family? We just don't see very much of that.
Right. Sabina, you're a filmmaker. I mean, and the challenge is for you that we want pleasure, we want entertainment, we want something which we see and we enjoy and which our audiences enjoy. How can we? People will say that, oh, it's like pamphleteering. I mean, you can read a book. Why should you see a serial or a...
I think there is a potential in a lot of the soaps. The problem is that they have never allowed the deviant character to grow. There's another series of Ekta Kapoor coming where there are 3 women characters. They're very young. They must be around 18, 19. I've forgotten the name. 2 of them are very submissive. This one girl wants to work and she works. She has managed to control her husband and she goes out to work. But she's ultimately being put under pressure by her 2 friends that she must conform. And she will ultimately in the next 20 episodes conform. But she is a very interesting character because she has got married. She's done everything which is there. But she has the desire to live, which is there throughout the thing.
Thank you, Sabina. Thank you so much, Anita. I think we had a very meaningful discussion. There were certain very important points that were made. That in the 80s we had the emergence of commercial soap operas, which were traditional and conservative, tended to confine the woman within the home. Then in the early 90s we had attempts to break this stereotypical projection of women. The 90s sees a swing back towards the more ritualistic, conservative image of women. But one thing which emerged from the discussion is that even within these various conservative images of women, there are possibilities of giving an opportunity to the alternative voice, to a different image of women, which is more related to the real lives and aspirations and experiences of women. Thank you.